You open your eyes once more, and the first thought that crosses your mind is not gratitude for the new day, nor hope for the possibilities that unfold before you. It is a familiar weight, like a stone in your chest, whispering softly that nothing you do today really matters. Your feet touch the cold floor, your body moves through the automatic gestures of morning, but inside, something vital surrendered long ago. You brush your teeth looking in the mirror, but you don't recognize yourself in the image that looks back. It's as if you were an actor performing your own life, following a script that lost meaning pages ago. The coffee tastes the same as always, the same superficial conversations happen, the same commitments await you, and you fulfill all of this with the precision of a well-oiled machine. But inside, in that secret place where your true essence lives, there is a deafening silence, a surrender that no one sees, that no one suspects. You function perfectly on the outside, while dying slowly on the inside, and perhaps the most painful part is that no one around you seems to notice this death in slow motion. If you recognized your own story in these words, if you felt a tightness in your heart, realizing that you are not alone in this experience, then you have arrived at the right place, at the right time. This channel was born exactly for people like you, who carry this silent pain of being alive without truly living. Here you will find not only deep understanding for what you're feeling, but real and tested paths to rediscover the lost meaning, to awaken again that spark that once made your eyes shine. Each video is like an intimate conversation with someone who truly understands your journey, who has been exactly where you are now and found a way back home. If you want to be part of this community of brave people who decided not to accept a half-lived life, click subscribe now and hit the bell to not miss any of these reflections that can transform your perspective. And if this video has already touched something deep within you, leave your like so that more people who need to hear these words can find us. Franz Kafka, that writer who managed to translate into words the darkest labyrinths of the human soul, intimately knew this sensation of awakening daily to a life that has become strange to ourselves. In his stories, the protagonists frequently find themselves trapped in absurd situations, navigating incomprehensible bureaucracies, transforming into creatures they don't recognize, living existences that have lost any connection with their deepest desires. But Kafka wasn't writing fantastic fiction. He was mapping the psychological territory where so many of us get lost, that place where we continue functioning externally while our true vitality drains away drop by drop. Kafka's genius was realizing that this internal surrender doesn't happen overnight, like a dramatic accident that marks a clear before and after in our lives. On the contrary, it is a gradual process, almost imperceptible, like a plant that withers so slowly that we only notice when it is already completely dry. Modern man, according to what Kafka observed already at the beginning of the last century, lives in a peculiar condition of alienation that has intensified exponentially in our days. We wake up in beds we bought to impress people we barely know. We wear clothes chosen to project an image that doesn't necessarily reflect who we are. We drive to jobs that drain our vital energy in exchange for money we spend on things that promise to make us happy but only keep us busy. It is a wheel that spins infinitely, and with each turn, we lose a little more contact with what we really are, with what we really desire, with what would give authentic meaning to our existence. The tragedy is not in working or having responsibilities, but in discovering one day that we have become strangers to ourselves, that our life has transformed into a sequence of automatic gestures executed by someone we no longer know who is. Kafka understood that this transformation happens because we stop questioning the structures that surround us. We accept that things are as they are because they have always been this way, that there are no real alternatives to the ways of living that were presented to us, that our only choice is to adapt better to the existing system. But this adaptation has an invisible cost. Each time we swallow our authenticity to fit better into expected social molds, each time we silence our inner voice to avoid friction, each time we choose the security of the known instead of the adventure of the unknown, we lose a fragment of our soul. And one day, we wake up realizing that we have become experts at living someone else's life, that we have developed an impressive competence in being who we are not, that we can perfectly execute a script we never wrote. And you, have you ever felt that strange sensation of living someone else's life, that painful perception that your days have become a mechanical repetition of gestures that have lost their meaning? If you're going through this now, leave in the comments, "I exist, but I don't live." Your courage in sharing this truth might be exactly the validation another person needs today to feel less alone in this experience so human and at the same time so isolating. The Kafkaesque perception goes even deeper by revealing how we create our own invisible prisons. It is not only external structures that imprison us, but mainly internal ones, those we build stone by stone through our limiting beliefs, our unquestioned fears, our needs for approval that have become more important than our need for authenticity. Kafka showed characters who literally transformed into insects, but the real transformation he was describing is even more subtle and devastating. It is the gradual metamorphosis of a human being full of possibilities into a social function, of a unique soul into an identification number, of a rich and complex internal universe into a set of predictable and socially accepted behaviors. The protagonist of the metamorphosis wakes up transformed into an insect, but we wake up every day a little less human, a little more distant from what we were called to be. Modern society, with its emphasis on productivity, efficiency, constant competitiveness, has created an environment where it is almost impossible to maintain contact with our deepest essence. We are constantly stimulated to compare ourselves with others, to seek external validation, to measure our worth through metrics that don't necessarily reflect our true inner wealth. Social media has intensified this process by offering us a constant window into the apparently perfect lives of other people, creating additional pressure to perform an edited version of ourselves. We post the best photos, share the happiest moments, build an online narrative that frequently has little relation to our internal reality. And so we divide ourselves in two. There is the self the world sees, always smiling, always productive, always well-adjusted, and there is the secret self, the one who feels the emptiness, who questions the meaning of all this, who wonders if this is really the life they wanted to live. Kafka realized that this internal division generates a specific type of suffering, the anguish of living an inauthentic life. It is not just depression or anxiety in the clinical sense, although it may include these elements. It is a more subtle sensation and, perhaps for this very reason, more corrosive. It is the perception that we are wasting our existence, that there is a truer version of ourselves that is being suffocated by the demands of daily life, that our real life is being indefinitely postponed while we fulfill obligations we didn't consciously choose. It is like being a musician who never plays their own music, but spends their whole life executing scores written by others, or like being a painter who only produces copies of famous works, never exploring their own artistic vision. The process of internal surrender is also intimately linked to our relationship with time. Kafka observed how modernity taught us to always live in the future or the past, rarely in the present. We work today thinking about retirement. We study thinking about the diploma, we relate thinking about marriage, we save thinking about vacations. Our present life becomes a means to achieve future objectives that, when finally reached, frequently don't bring us the satisfaction we expected, and then we create new future objectives, perpetuating the cycle. Meanwhile, the present, which is the only time where life really happens, escapes through our fingers like water. We reach the end of each day, realizing that we were not really present at any moment, that we functioned on autopilot, that we let another opportunity to live fully pass unnoticed. This disconnection from the present also manifests in our relationship with our own feelings. Society taught us that inconvenient feelings should be quickly resolved or suppressed. If we are sad, we should find a way to be happy as quickly as possible. If we are anxious, we should find techniques to calm ourselves immediately. If we are angry, we should control this emotion because it is socially inadequate. But Kafka understood that our feelings, even the most uncomfortable ones, are messengers of the soul, indicators that something important is happening in our internal world. When we systematically suppress them, we lose access to a crucial source of information about ourselves, about our true desires, our limits, our deepest values. Internal surrender also feeds on our tendency to seek external solutions for internal problems. We believe that if we get the right job, the right relationship, the right house, the right amount in the bank account, then we will finally feel complete and satisfied. But Kafka knew this is a subtle trap. While we make our happiness dependent on external factors, we remain prisoners of circumstances over which we have limited control. True freedom, true vitality can only be found when we learn to cultivate a sense of purpose and meaning that doesn't depend exclusively on external validation or achievements. This doesn't mean we should isolate ourselves from the world or ignore our practical responsibilities, but rather that we need to find a balance where our external life is an authentic expression of our internal life, not a betrayal of it. The most disturbing aspect of this condition is how it gradually normalizes. We begin to accept that it is normal to wake up without enthusiasm, that it is normal to work at something that doesn't inspire us, that it is normal to maintain relationships where we don't feel truly seen or understood, that it is normal to live a life that doesn't reflect our deepest values. We develop an impressive tolerance for chronic dissatisfaction as if it was simply part of the adult condition. Kafka showed how his characters often didn't even try to escape from their absurd situations. They simply adapted to them, found ways to function within systems that made no sense, accepted as inevitable what could be questioned and transformed. But there is a hidden wisdom in Kafka's work that frequently goes unnoticed. His characters, even in the most desperate situations, never completely stop seeking meaning. There is always a spark of humanity that persists, a final refusal to accept that life is just a sequence of random and purposeless events. This spark is what allows us to recognize our condition of alienation as a problem to be faced, not as a reality to be passively accepted. It is what makes us feel discomfort when we realize we are living on autopilot, that disturbs us when we discover we have lost contact with our oldest dreams, that moves us to seek something more authentic and meaningful. The journey back to vitality begins with the courage to admit our current condition without judgment. It is not about blaming ourselves for having reached this point, but about honestly recognizing where we are so we can consciously decide where we want to go. Kafka understood that genuine transformation never begins with denial or self-deception, but always with a lucid and compassionate look at our present reality. It takes courage to admit that we are not living the life we really want, that we have become strangers to ourselves, that we have developed behavior patterns that don't reflect our true nature. But this admission, however painful it may be initially, is also the first step to recover our agency, our capacity to make conscious choices about how we want to live. The path back also involves rediscovering our capacity for questioning. Kafka was a master at asking disturbing questions. Why do we accept certain things as inevitable? Who decided that life should be lived this way? What would happen if we chose a different path? These questions are not merely intellectual, they are invitations to examine the invisible premises that govern our lives, to identify the beliefs we internalized without questioning, to explore possibilities we might not have considered before. When we begin to genuinely question, we discover that many of the limitations we accepted as absolute are in fact social constructions that can be challenged and transformed. Reconnecting with our vitality also necessarily involves cultivating presence. Kafka showed how alienation disconnects us from the present moment, making us always live in some other mental place than here and now. But it is only in the present that we can really make contact with our authentic experience, that we can genuinely feel what is happening in our body, in our emotions, in our soul. The practice of presence is not just a relaxation technique or mindfulness. It is a revolutionary act of refusal to live on autopilot, a conscious decision to fully inhabit our own life instead of just watching it pass by. There is also the need to recover our connection with creativity and authentic expression. Kafka was a writer because writing was his way of giving form to internal chaos, of finding meaning in apparently absurd human experience. Each person has their own form of creative expression, which can be art, music, dance, cooking, gardening, or any activity that allows our interior essence to manifest in the external world. Creativity is not a luxury or a hobby. It is a fundamental necessity of the human soul, a way to keep alive our connection with what is most unique and authentic in us. When we lose contact with our creativity, we also lose a vital source of meaning and purpose. The transformation from internal surrender to renewed vitality is a process that requires patience and compassion for ourselves. It is not about a dramatic change that happens overnight, but about a series of small, conscious choices that, accumulated over time, rebuild our experience of being alive. It can begin with something as simple as dedicating 5 minutes a day to really feel our breathing, or reserving a moment to write about our true feelings, or making a small but authentic decision that goes against our automatic tendencies to always please or always follow the safest path. Each time we choose consciously instead of reacting automatically, we recover a bit of our agency, a bit of our humanity, a bit of our lost vitality. Kafka also teaches us about the importance of accepting ambiguity and uncertainty as natural parts of human experience. Much of our internal surrender comes from trying to control aspects of life that are fundamentally uncontrollable, from finding absolute certainties in a world that is inherently uncertain. When we learn to dance with uncertainty instead of fighting against it, when we develop the capacity to live with questions instead of insisting on having all the answers, we discover a peculiar freedom. It is the freedom to experiment, to try new things, to fail and learn, to change direction when necessary. It is the freedom to be human instead of trying to be a predictable and controllable machine. The journey also involves relearning to value our internal experience as being as important as our external performance. Society trained us to judge our worth mainly through external metrics: how much we earn, what position we occupy, how others see us, what achievements we can list on our resume. But Kafka knew that inner life, the quality of our thoughts, the depth of our feelings, the authenticity of our choices, the beauty of our dreams, are at least as important as any external achievement. When we begin to honor our internal experience, we discover unexpected resources of strength, creativity, and wisdom that were always there, just ignored or devalued. Finally, Kafka's work reminds us that the human condition necessarily includes elements of suffering, confusion, and search. It is not about completely eliminating these aspects of experience, but about finding more conscious and constructive ways to relate to them. The goal is not constant happiness or a life without problems, but a more authentic existence, more present, more connected with our deepest values. It is possible to wake up every day and choose to truly live, even when life is difficult, even when we don't have all the answers, even when the path ahead is uncertain. The difference between existing and living lies in the quality of our presence, in the depth of our engagement, in the authenticity of our choices. Kafka shows us that, even in the most complex labyrinths of modern existence, there is always a possibility of finding our way back home, back to ourselves, back to a life that is genuinely worth living. The first step is always the simplest and the most difficult, to awaken, not just physically but also spiritually, and to consciously choose how we want to inhabit this day that opens before us.